Cancel culture is back in a big way. Now the comedians are canceling themselves. I'm about to read a list of recently departed comedians. Rest in pieces. These are all the comedians that agreed to go to the Saudi Arabian Riyadh Comedy Festival, and then I'm gonna pick on a few guys. Like, I'm gonna talk about Dave Chappelle. Everybody's giving Bill Burr shit for being going over there. Okay, I'll talk about him, but really Dave Chappelle is always the guy I like to pick on because I don't like him. So rest in peace. Here are all the dead comedians, and this is a lot of the top 100 comedy podcast guys who have just ruined their careers by going to Saudi Arabia. Do you remember when 9/11 happened and the only people who were allowed to leave the country, because all air traffic was just completely stopped, the only people who were allowed to leave the country were people with the surname Bin Laden. They were allowed, then they got out of here real quick. What's that about? Remember that? Remember 9/11? That was Saudi Arabia. More on that later. Bill Burr, these are, rest in peace. These guys are dead now. Bill Burr, Tom Segura, Whitney Cummings. Isn't anybody surprised about Whitney? That's probably the one comment everybody made in their videos where they were like, well, we expect that Whitney would do anything. She would do anything. She probably went on a Dubai boat tour and they shit on her chest and they didn't even know who she was. Andrew Schulz, Dave Chappelle, Pete Davidson, that guy's a comedian. Kevin Hart, Louis C.K., Fluffy. Do you know who Fluffy is? That's Gabriel Iglesias. Gabriel Iglesias is one of those Mexican lie comedians. It's like a genre of comedy. There's a lot of guys on Netflix, if you have Netflix, and there's Mexican comedians and they tell these lie stories. Anyway, it's style of comedy. Aziz Ansari, Bobby Lee, Andrew Santino, Jimmy Carr, Chris DiStefano, Mark Normand, Russell Peters, Chris Tucker. Russell Peters, he's the guy that his whole career is predicated on turning Nola Rasmussen stories into comedy bits and stealing other people's jokes and stealing jokes out of joke books. Because India wasn't allowed to have comedy because they're too busy eating shit. Swatting flies. Chris Tucker, he's a comedian. I guess he used to be. Wayne Brady and Hannibal Buress. Hannibal Buress, I believe, would do it. He'd do anything. Tim Dillon was supposed to go there too, but he talked about slaves. So they said, you're not coming over here. So the Saudi royals didn't want Tim Dillon because he talked about slaves before he went. So if you want to know what the comedians going to the Riyadh Comedy Festival aren't allowed to talk about, they're not allowed to talk about slaves. And you think that they would be, because there's a large percentage of people that live in Saudi Arabia that are slaves. I think the numbers were 740,000 slaves. That's a lot of people. And if that's how many people we know are slaves in Saudi Arabia, then there's more. And the stuff that's been done to them is disgusting because they don't even chart. So if there's 740,000 slaves in Saudi Arabia, you know that there's more. And that's a lot. Bill Burr, do you think his wife went with him to Saudi Arabia? Did she have slaves, Saudi Arabian slaves, wait on her? Is she okay with her husband going over there and getting, the great treatment? I'm not talking about, when Bill Burr went into Burger King or Starbucks or whatever in Saudi Arabia. It's just like America. What an asshole. I don't like Bill Burr. And you really know that if you're one of my subscribers, there's like 30 people that consistently watch videos. You know what I'm going to say about Dave Chappelle. I'm going to say it again. Dave Chappelle, he wants us to think he's a cool guy. And he directly said that. He's like, I just wanted people to think I was a cool guy. But he's not a cool guy. Because he went on Oprah, and he's the guy that wouldn't take the Comedy Central money and went to Africa. And now he's going to Saudi Arabia. He took the money to go over there. They didn't even give him a show on Comedy Central. He's just going over there for money. And he's not allowed to talk about slavery. But if you remember his, stand-up bits where he's talking how he's, well, basically Dave Chappelle's racist against white people. That's okay. That could be comedy. This is the problem I have with Dave Chappelle. He went on Oprah and he said, I went into my trailer and I saw the dress. And I said, what's this? And he goes through this whole bullshit story about how he didn't want to wear the dress. And then it was the first thing that he did. The first thing that Dave Chappelle did that everybody forgot about because nobody watches the movie was that he was in Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is one of the shittiest Mel Brooks movies. And he wore a dress and he played it up and did the clutch the pearls, and he was the one that was like hamming it up the most, pretending to be a woman in Robin Hood Men in Tights. It was literally the first thing he did in a big Hollywood picture. Mel Brooks isn't a small name. Maybe people don't remember who he is anymore, but he was in a Mel Brooks movie, and the first thing he did was wear a dress. And then he comes on Oprah and tells that bullshit story. I went into my trailer and the dress was there. I just didn't want to do it. And he makes this big deal about wearing a dress. It was the first thing he did. He sucks. He has zero credibility. He was never a cool guy, and he ruined it when he went on Oprah. And fuck, what about Comedy Central? Who gives a shit? He took the Saudi money. Canceled. And his last specials on Netflix, last one I saw, sucked. And I'm sure there was 3 after that, and I'm sure they were great. Anyway, fuck Dave Chappelle. Pete Davidson, who cares? Kevin Hart, isn't Kevin Hart great? No. He's the guy that was in those Diddy videos laughing about how Diddy's talking about waking up in bed with Usher, and he's laughing about it and everything. So, whatever. Louis C.K. Did you ever see that movie Louis C.K. made called Daddy? Where it's basically his Woody Allen movie, where it's all about like preying on underage girls or whatever it was about. Louis C.K., he was the guy that said, hey, would you mind if I just stood over here and masturbated into a plant and you have to stay there and watch? And he stood in front of the door so the women comedian couldn't leave the green room, and he got canceled. But I could see why he'd be a big hit in Saudi Arabia. Mark Normand, what about Mark Normand? Isn't he a cool guy? No, he took the Saudi money. They're the 9/11 guys. This is the Shane Gillis thing. Shane Gillis said he couldn't take, I wrote it down here. Shane Gillis said, no, aren't they exactly the 9/11 guys? That's a direct quote from Shane Gillis. Yes, they are. And everybody that agreed to go on this tour saw the money and threw everything else out the window. And now they're dead. Like, they've ruined their careers. They're gonna keep going. It's not good. Because everybody's gonna give them shit. Everybody is looking to give anybody shit for anything. So if you're people have their YouTube channels predicated on looking for anything, for ass hair to be out of place with any of the comedians. Like, there are people whose channels are based on shitting on Joe Rogan, and there's a lot of hate for Bill Burr and Tom Segura and everything like that. Tom Segura, I'm sorry, Bill Burr with his wife. Did you ever see that picture where Bill Burr's wife is giving the finger to Trump? Yeah, and then now her money comes from slavery. 740,000 slaves in Saudi Arabia. And Bill Burr's like, you know what? It's not bad. I could have went to Burger King. I could have went to McDonald's. I went to McDonald's. I should have went to Burger King. That's, yeah, that guy. Yeah. So Bill Burr said that billionaires needed to be put down like dogs. But trillionaires, that's a lot of money. So when trillionaires, call you at their behest to come over, and they say, don't talk about Saudi royals, don't talk about slaves, because Tim Dillon didn't get to go because he talked about slaves on his podcast, and he's like, but I don't care about slaves. He's completely shameless. He puts that, Tim Dillon's the guy that, he says he puts the thing in his mouth, which is gross, but a lot of people do that. And he said, I don't care. He said he didn't even care about slaves, and they were like, no, you can't talk about that. Did they build Neom yet in Saudi Arabia? Did you ever hear about the Instagram models going over in Dubai boat trips, and they come back with they had to get shit on, like literally shit on, because these guys are like, we have so much money, I don't know what to do. Why don't we call Instagram models and shit on them, like literally shit on them. Let's have a Dubai steamer. So anyway, rest in peace, all those comedians. Rest in pieces. And I still don't think Shane Gillis is funny, but he said no. I mean, I can respect him for that. I can't respect him for taking the Bud Light money when him and Joe Rogan and Kid Rock trash Bud Light, and then they're cracking a Bud, and he's like, nope, I don't have any problems with Bud Light. Shane Gillis didn't take the Saudi money. Okay, good, but he did take the Bud Light money. How much did they give him? Did Bud Light offer him more money than the Saudis? I don't know. Joe Rogan took the Bud Light money. Remember when he opened, I'm just shitting on Joe Rogan. Remember when Kid Rock was like shooting a shotgun at cases of Bud Light because there was some tranny's face on it? And then he came on Joe Rogan and he's cracking a Bud, and that's how they opened the show. And he said, you know what? The CEO of Bud Light's not a bad guy. And they talk about how they opened the Joe Rogan Experience talking about how they took the money from Bud Light. So I know Joe Rogan didn't go to Saudi Arabia, but fuck him anyway. He took the Bud Light money. It's just, you know what I mean? It's just selling out. So who's your top comedians? None of them, not even Shane Gillis or Joe Rogan. And you didn't really think those guys were funny anyway, because when you watch a Joe Rogan video, it's to shit on him, right? Right. So anyway, there's my 2 cents. I know that my channel description says sit down, stay home comedy. I don't know that I really do comedy. It's more, I should change my description to sit down, stay home commentary. So here's my commentary on the dead comedians, because I didn't like any of these guys anyway, not any of them. They're dead to me now. Boy, how much did they get paid? I heard some of them got like $1 million or $150,000. Yeah, that's it. They're done. Like, you're gonna keep watching them? How can you look at those? You can watch Bad Friends podcast now? Although it's not surprising that Bobby Lee would take the money. How are these guys gonna make excuses for it? Bill Burr is the one that they really tore new one. And I don't like Bill Burr. Give him shit. Go ahead, tear him a new one. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. I mean, some of these guys I get taking any money. But, you know, if you're an American, these are all American comedians. Even, you know, Russell Peters, I guess you could say, is an American. I don't know. You know, except that he's a thief, joke thief and everything. And Russell Peters sucks and he's lame. But all these guys on the list are lame. All these names on the list are lame. And and Dave Chappelle sucks. He took the Saudi money. How's he gonna make a joke? You think he's a cool guy? Anyway, fuck these guys.
I'm gonna come clean with everybody. I'm gay. I'm gay.